It's 8:07 on WMAL. We've already begun with Ann Coulter here. Larry O'Connor with Dan Bongino in for Brian Wilson. And Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter, thanks for being here.
Why, thank you for having me. I can't believe you got me out of bed at this hour.
I know. You're notorious. Well, I assumed you're still up from West Coast time or something. You're just finishing your day, right?
That's right. I basically am. We had the Breitbart party last night. Then I did Jim Bohannon. Then I went home and had to write my column.
Oh, man. All right. Well, we'll keep you going here. If you want to talk to Ann Coulter, by the way, she is here throughout the hour, and there's plenty to talk about. So give us a call at 888-630-WMAL. But we've got to start with your brand new book, Adios America, The Less Plan to Turn Our Country into a Third World Hellhole. You always pull punches in your titles.
Yes, it's very subtle.
Let's talk about the immigration thing really. You've been on this forever. You're so consistent on this issue, and I know that you think it's the secret of political success. It's amazing to me how many people in this town think that that keeping a firm hand on the immigration issue is a disaster for the Republican Party. I was just on Fox News yesterday. Simon Rosenberg, nice guy from the left, said Republicans need to appeal to Latino voters or they're never going to win. Could you please blow that myth apart? Because I've read it in your book, and you have the numbers.
Yes, well, actually, Byron York, the great Byron York, ran them first after the election. He used Nate Silver's, the famed statistician.
Yeah, he's the guru that ESPN picked up because he knows everything there is to know about numbers and politics.
He does. Right? He's very good at numbers. And anyway, he had some chart, and Byron ran the numbers. And he checked with Nate Silver. I saw Byron at my book party last night. And he said, and he emailed and said, look, I've just plugged in some numbers here. Am I right? And what it turns out is if 71% of Hispanics had voted for Romney, Romney still would have lost. If another 4%, not 40, 4, one digit, white people had voted for Romney, he would have won. So what does the RNC and Reince Priebus, what are they going to focus on like a laser beam? Let's get slightly more of the Hispanic voters. Look, right. In a presidential election, a Republican is never going to get 71% of Hispanics. George Bush turned his White House over to an entire Hispandering organization. He was the first president to start giving weekly addresses partially in Spanish. He had a Spanish language web page. As you know, he campaigned with that half Mexican nephew of his. That was like an extra appendage with him. George P. Bush gave a partly Spanish primetime address at the Republican National Convention. So huge success that we're all supposed to emulate. He still lost the Hispanic vote.
Right.
A bad year for Democrats is getting 60%. And, I mean, just generally, why are Republicans constantly taking advice from the New York Times? Our dearest, truest friend. They're always trying to help Republicans get more votes. And Republicans have fallen for the same scam over and over and over again with the Equal Rights Amendment a million years ago. Now the Equal Rights Amendment, to the extent anyone remembers it, is a laugh line. But Republicans were once persuaded you need to peel off a few more feminists. Right. That's the key to success, Republicans. And then, Ronald Reagan comes along, and God bless Phyllis Schlafly, and says, no, this is a disaster, a constitutional amendment. You're just turning this over to the courts. They'll start ruling all sorts of crazy things like unisex bathrooms. And it turns out Americans were against it. A winning issue. But the Republican platform used to be in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment. The most striking example, the same thing with abortion. I would say the most striking example where we have been through this thing for 20 years, Republicans taking advice from Democrats, was gun control. Republicans were big gun controllers because the New York Times and Chuck Schumer used to assure them, don't you worry, Republicans, 95% of Americans support waiting periods. And now we're getting the same thing with the Hispandering. No, your base are white voters. Drive up the white vote. But Republicans seem to be embarrassed about getting whites to vote for them. Why should they be embarrassed with white votes?
I think that discounts the fact, though, too, Ann, that there's a significant portion of the Hispanic community, my wife and mother-in-law included, who are legal immigrants, who are frankly harder on immigration than I am at times, because their take is, hey, what the heck is this? I went spent $10,000 of my own money on lawyers, went through this whole problem. Why do you get a free pass? You know?
Not only that, and I would say legal immigrants, What harms legal immigrants the most? Most of the immigrants we've been taking in since 1970 are poor, uneducated, come from wildly diverse cultures. They're at the lowest rung of the economic spectrum. Same thing with African Americans. They had just come out of 100 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and then Democrats decided to help by destroying the black family. So it is the people at the lowest rung of society who are hurt the most by bringing in low-skilled workers. But the Democrats don't care about the immigrants that were admitted last year or the year before. We know they don't give a crap about black people. So they're bringing in people who will drive down the wages of these are most needy Americans, the ones who need the jobs. We don't need to pass a law to increase the minimum wage. We need to have fewer workers coming in competing for those jobs. And they act like that, they walk around, Democrats, like they're, Martin Luther King. Because, they love Lupe the maid. Lupe is like family. Except the way I remember it, my family was never required to serve us, not sit at the dinner table and then clean up afterwards. So Lupe is not really like family. But they're the ones who are harming Lupe the maid by driving down her wages.
Meanwhile, we had two presidential candidates announced this week, Ann Coulter. Jeb Bush on Monday, and it sounded like this.
As a candidate, I intend to let everyone hear my message, including the many who can express their love of country in a different language. Ayúdenos en tener una campaña que les da la bienvenida. Trabajen con nosotros por
Yeah, you get the picture. You talked about the Hispandering, but then you had Donald Trump yesterday. He brought this.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I will have Mexico pay for that wall.
All right, so contrast and compare, Ann Coulter.
Well, in a way, I wish it could be these two candidates, because on one hand, you kind of have to admire Bush's honesty. He's just coming right out saying, screw you, white voters. This is totally an Hispandering operation. I have learned nothing. I have forgotten nothing. So you kind of have to admire his honesty. And on one hand, with Donald Trump, I mean, as you probably know, for years I've been really opposed to anyone running who is not or has not been a governor, because I think it distracts us. It wastes our time. Look, Carly Fiorina, incredibly articulate, but please knock it off. It's wasting Republican voters' time. Same thing, Ben Carson. He is such a brilliant surgeon, but don't be distracted, Republicans. It's a shiny object. It's never going to be a surgeon. It's going to be a governor. So on one hand, I don't like someone else getting in who is not a governor. On the other hand, oh my gosh, he's magnificent. And I think it raises the possibility of forcing the media to talk about something they so do not want to talk about. Right. And I mean, what people think about, what they talk about, it's determined so much by our media culture, more than people realize. The media decide what issues will be on the menu today, and you may not choose any items off the menu. No, these are the issues we're talking about. But wait a second, I wanted to talk about immigration. No, look at the menu. And people just don't think about things that aren't even in the news. And Trump is exotic and smart, and I'm a big enough celebrity that he can force the media to talk about this. Yes. And I am telling you, there is no way they can win this argument, which is why I haven't been on any media other than a few Fox shows and talk radio.
Well, you did some media with Jorge Ramos,
that's
though,
true.
And I do want to talk to you about that because I thought it was a brilliant sit-down, actually. And we'll get to it in a moment. And also for your calls, for the one and only Ann Coulter, we're, of course, talking about her brand new book, Adios America, which you better get right now. It's 8:50 now. It's 79, 8:16 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Yes, you did Jorge Ramos, or you did his show, I should say, on Fusion, on the Fusion Network, right?
Well, yes, I did, and I love Jorge for that.
Yeah, you know what? I thought he gave you the whole hour, right? And it was one of those town hall things.
Well, it was about 40 minutes. We went over, but since nobody sees Fusion, it's all, I mean, it's on
online.
TV. It's all online, and so you can see the extra 10 minutes. So it was 30 minutes. Was technically on whatever network's Gary Fusion, but online you can see the extra 10 minutes. And that's where I got that bratty Hispanic kid going on and on and on and on about what a racist... That was a different one. This is the one, what a racist country America is. And I kept trying to answer, and then he'd start telling me again how racist America was. So after doing my snoring, I finally... he'd just eaten up my entire answer time, and I just said, you're not black, cut the racism crap.
But that hugger thing was strange.
The woman who wanted to give you a hug. Yeah.
Like, listen, when you came in, we gave the fist bump, and we were talking about how handsome handshaking is so bizarre. Like, let's trade each other's. Why would you want to hug someone? That's just so strange.
Yeah, a stranger at least. All right, but I loved this exchange with Jorge. Listen to this.
You've said that Americans should fear immigrants more than ISIS.
Yes.
Most immigrants are not terrorists, not criminals.
I have a little tip.
No one is biologically predisposed
if you
to
don't
commit
want
a
to be
crime.
killed by ISIS, don't go to Syria. If you don't want to be killed by a Mexican, there's nothing I can tell you.
All right, Ann Coulter. That actually, a lot of conservatives were concerned about that too, because they think you're saying ISIS is not that big of a threat, and they are concerned about Islamic terrorism. Why don't you expand on this idea?
Well, just to, a little footnote to get off the topic of the book. All these conservatives, these hairy-chested conservatives, so dying to go after ISIS, and they were so into attacking Syria. Yeah, screw them. I haven't backed away from the Iraq War. They're all running for cover the moment, the New York Times sneers at them. Anything you can say about ISIS, Saddam was worse. Anything you can say about Syria. How many people, I wrote a column about this going point by point, how many people Assad had used poison gas on, it was like 80 or something?
Yeah.
Saddam killed 20 or 100 times more of his own people
Kurds, yes.
with poison gas. Anything you can say about all these groups, conservatives want to attack now. Yeah, we'll attack ISIS. The New York Times will sneer and they'll all say, oh, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. Yeah, so screw all of them who want to go after ISIS now.
Can I just quickly point out, you just referred in a backhanded way to Lindsey Graham as a hairy-chested Republican. That image is...
I got to tell you, his whole presidential campaign, I think, is just meant to piss me off.
That was going to be the slogan. Vote Lindsey Graham, really piss off Ann Coulter.
I think he doesn't even want to be president. I think he just went out drinking with some friends and said, watch this.
All right. But let's now expand. I would love to have been at that table. Let's expand on this idea that we as Americans have much more to fear for our safety from violent crime from a Mexican coming across the border illegally in our country than we do ISIS.
Or legally in the country. Mexico most of all, because they are the peasant culture closest to us, but the 1965 Immigration Act was designed to bring in peasant people, uneducated people, low-skilled people, not because America looked around the world and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we were Somalia? Let's turn our country into Somalia. No, it was because Democrats needed the votes. Democrats, other than the 1964 landslide, Democrats haven't been able to get a majority of white people to vote for them since 1948. They saw, we are losing this war, and we really like George McGovern. Let's bring in new people, and they'll vote for George McGovern. And now that we're close enough to the tipping point, Democrats brag about it. This Roy Teixeira, big Democratic consultant, he's been saying the demographic change is coming. Ha-ha, Republicans. And after Obama's election, I think it was his re-election, Teixeira wrote a big piece calling it George McGovern's revenge. Immigrants since 1970 are voting 8-2 for the Democrats. And you see it more explicitly in places like Salon and MSNBC, where they laugh and say, ha-ha, old white people, you're dying off. It's a new country. Now them, I hate. The immigrants, they're not like rushing across the border saying, ha-ha, the browning of America. They don't care. They want the welfare and the jobs. But Democrats decided, no, we have a different present for you. We're going to give you citizenship and the right to vote. And, the immigrants just want the food stamps and the jobs, and they'll send the money home. But it's a bad combo platter. If we were bringing in Poland's poor or Russia's poor, Democrats wouldn't be able to mau Republicans this way and act as if immigrants are American blacks and we're making up for the legacy of slavery. But that's why I keep saying to people, whether you're a lesbian who wants to bring her date to the high school prom, or a feminist claiming that you're not paid enough, or someone who just set foot in this country from, Ecuador or Somalia, you're not black. Knock off the racism crap. We owe you nothing. It's bad enough with the lesbians and whatever, and my gender, because we've been so oppressed in this country. And as you'll see in my book, oh boy, American women are about to discover American men are the best they ever had it, and that's about to change.
Most specific, when you say you're not black, you mean a black ancestor of American slavery.
Yes, not say a half Kenyan president.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, he's done. His ancestors weren't slaves.
He he has absolutely no direct relation
I've
to the African American experience.
maintained the first black president would be a Republican. I still maintain the first American black president will be a Republican.
Well, it's interesting on Drudge today. There's a piece about a town in Maine.
Lewiston, I write about it in my book.
How it's now 10%. The state was largely white. Now it's is it Somalian?
Somalian. Oh yes, with their multicultural ways. They're making it very vibrant.
Yeah, and they're having some interesting, cultural wars going on.
It's way more than 10%. One thing I discovered in writing this book, you cannot go by the census figures because I've been to towns. I can see it with my own eyes. Danbury, Connecticut. It's Mexico now. And they say it's like 10% Mexican. So you have to, I've thought, what is going on? Well, of course, illegal aliens, weirdly, they don't answer government surveys completely honestly. And so what you have to look for are things like who's graduating from the high school. You look for the crime reports. Lewiston, I will bet you, is more than 10% Somali. And I write about in my book because they brought in so many Somali refugees who instantly start committing crimes and going on welfare. They're bankrupting this small working class town, lovely little town in Maine. And the mayor wrote to the Somali elders saying, we've been valiant. We've brought in all these refugees. We have spent so much money, but the town is about to go bankrupt. And we implore you to please not or ask your fellow Somalis to stop moving to Little Lewiston, Maine. And how did the Somalis respond? Well, this is the one part of American culture that immigrants pick up like lightning. They accused him of racism.
There you go. They got a lawyer, and the ACLU is with them. All right, Ann Coulter is our guest, and we want to bring you in on this, too. Let's start with Kevin in Warrenton real fast. Kevin, you're on WMAL. You say hi to Ann Coulter.
Yeah, if you do the math based on, the high number of the illegals that they say are here, you basically have about 10 to 14 illegitimate members of the House of Representatives. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point. No, that's fantastic. No, it's turning out in modern society, anything that doesn't help the Democrats win is racist, including voter ID.
Yeah. More with Ann Coulter. She's more than just her book, Adios America. She has comments and opinions on all things in our culture, and we're going to do that as well as take your calls. But first, it's 8:25. WMAL traffic and weather every time.
At AM 630.
8:37 on WMAL. It's where Washington comes to talk. Larry O'Connor here alongside Dan Bongino, who's in for Brian Wilson.
Good morning.
And we're having a hell of a time here in studio with Ann Coulter.
Okay.
Everyone has a hell of a time with Ann Coulter, no matter where she goes. Even people of the left. Bill Maher has his real-time show there on HBO, and you're a frequent guest on that.
Yes, I'm flying out just to do it this Friday, and I was so excited when they told me the guest list had changed, which they hadn't told me to begin with, so I don't know why they felt like they needed to ask. But apparently, I will now be on with someone I have been dying to chit-chat with about this book, Luis Gutierrez.
Oh, my.
I'm shocked he's going on with you.
And, well, it's a panel, as you know, I do always get accused of this, and of course it's true. I'm totally preaching to the choir, that Bill Maher audience. They love me.
Oh, God.
The show will start with Bernie Sanders. I'm sure he's a big fan of mine. Joy Reid, my personal all-time favorite on MSNBC when she's not actually on air. She's running the camera. She's doing the makeup. They have an oxygen tank to just keep her working. Keep her working. She's on every show on MSNBC. And the resident liberal at Daily Caller, Matt Lewis. So, that's my ally, the one who is totally against me. And there I am preaching to the choir.
He's the
again.
righteous Republican over there who's trying to tell us all how we're supposed to talk about these things, Ann Coulter, and you didn't get the memo.
Supposed to talk about things?
Yeah.
No one will talk to me about this book.
Now, this is fascinating to me. So you did Fusion. You're going on real time with Bill Maher. It's amazing to me. A lot of people say that conservatives shouldn't even go on that show. Why are you giving Bill Maher time? Why do you go on MSNBC?
I'm not allowed to. I have no people who personally know Rachel Maddow. I've been having lunch with them. Call her now. I want to go on her show. Oh my gosh, I die to do any show on MSNBC.
You want to do that, and our dearly departed friend Andrew Breitbart, he couldn't wait to get on with Martin Bashir, or he would have loved to have done the Al Sharpton show. What do you say to the conservatives who suggest you shouldn't even go on that network? You want to walk into the fire. Right?
Who we want to talk to here is liberals. Why won't you put us on?
You want to convert. You want to actually get the. Otherwise, they would have never heard anything.
Well,
it's not even about evangelizing as much
right.
as engaging.
There is my particular mission to the world, but beyond that, I mean, just as a TV viewer, and I consume boatloads of TV. Debates are just more interesting. You learn more. You hear both sides. My favorite show on TV, which sadly doesn't exist, and I harangue him about it all the time, was Hannity and Combs.
Yes.
Because when I was busy, when I was writing a book, I couldn't watch that much TV. I want to hear both sides of every issue. And the funny thing about that show was somehow, I always ask Alan about this, do you always pull the short end of the stick? How do you, I mean, it's things that have nothing to do with politics, like Duke Lacrosse case. Okay, Alan, you're defending the stripper.
You know what's silly about this whole thing, though, guys? I've seen you on viral clips, probably more than any other conservative out there who writes books. You have this book out, Adios America. This works for both ends. If the clip goes viral, you get to promote your book, and MSNBC gets 1 million views on a station. Frankly, it's had a tough time.
MSNBC. I haven't been on that network.
That's my point. Like,
for years.
You would think they would be clamoring, though, to have you on, knowing that the clip was going to go viral at some point. I mean, everywhere you go, I see your clips.
Are you saying they have an agenda beyond good television, Dan?
No, I just mean, like, I'll scroll.
The Ed Schultz show is,
I scroll through my wife's Facebook,
that.
and it seems like every time you do a media hit that's not on a conservative outlet, it goes viral. And it just seems kind of silly that MSNBC doesn't say, hey, let's take advantage of this and get people to watch our show.
Well, forget MSNBC. How about the Today Show? How about Good Morning America? How about, this week with George Stephanopoulos?
Didn't your thing with The View go nuclear?
If we could just review, Anne has written now 11 New York Times bestsellers with zero mainstream media attention. This book, Adios America, is number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. I am the female Bob Woodward. If I were not a conservative, I wouldn't be able to write any more books because I'd be so busy collecting my rewards from the from the Kennedy Center. I'd be posing for Vanity Fair. I'd be on the cover of Glamour magazine. I would be on a postage stamp.
All right.
But instead, I can't get the time of day.
Our lines are jammed, and we're having way too much fun talking to Dan, but I promise we would get to you. So let's start with Greg in Olney. Greg, you are on WMAL with me, Dan Bongino, and Ann Coulter. I don't think that was proper English, but you're on anyway.
Oh, hey, thanks for taking my call.
Hey.
My question is about kind of what you guys were talking about, like talking to an audience. How do Republicans or just people who aren't just of the left, kind of compete in cities? It seems like major urban centers, it's just one-party rule, and unfortunately, it's been that way for a long time. So you don't really have an opposing view, and it just like you just don't have the options, and they don't even have like an apparatus where they even get like candidates on the ballot.
Greg, it's a great point. Even in red states, and those major urban centers are completely controlled by Democrats, and we see what happened in a place like Baltimore just recently when that happens.
They are running like a top.
So should Republicans even try to get into and engage there, or and how can they?
There are things they can do, but if you can't even get the National Republican Party to notice that the 2014 election was about blocking Obama's amnesty. I mean, right now in New York, rent control is about to expire. Republicans have this beautiful shot to save housing in New York, and no, they won't. They just want to keep their jobs. Let's go because they know they're going to be a minority after the next election. Well, let's just be nice to the Democrats. Let's keep rent control going, and you have the same thing with the Republicans in Washington. We just want to make sure we have that liberals like us. And as Mike Huckabee said, we're giving illegals in-state tuition to make up for the legacy of slavery. Wait, what? Did we enslave the Mexicans?
All right, let's go to Mike in Sunshine. You're next up on WMAL. Hey, Mike, you're on with Ann Coulter.
Thank you for taking my call. My mother came to the United States right off the banana boat. She was a teenager in 1950. She immediately learned English and assimilated. What's happened in the last 50 to 60 years? Where is it a different mindset of those coming?
Mike, I'm so glad you asked. I have the answer to that. As I was saying before, Democrats realized they couldn't win with Americans, but they could do really well with foreigners, so they brought in particular kinds of foreigners, very poor ones, preferably ones who don't speak English. Democrats have a much better chance with people who don't understand what they're saying. So Teddy Kennedy's Immigration Act, through a series of perverse rules, makes it basically impossible to immigrate to America from the countries that traditionally populated America. And instead, I mean, since 1970, the difference in post-1970 and pre-1970 immigrants could not be more different. So please stop weeping about your relatives at Ellis Island. It has nothing to do with that. Pre-1970 immigrants were more educated, bought more houses, made more income. 30% of them went home when they couldn't make it here. Post-1970, immigrants are more likely to be on welfare than the native population. And boy, are they voting for the Democrats.
The book is Adios America, The Left Plan to Turn Our Country into a Third World Hellhole. You must buy it for Ann Coulter. And Sylvia in Waldorf, she's one of our Real Housewives of WMAL. That's a real place on Facebook. You should join it, Ann. You get the last word here, Sylvia. Go.
One of my liberal friends in New Hampshire's head is spinning because he just found out that Ann Coulter loves the Grateful Dead. And what's your favorite song, and have you met the band?
I have met the band. I love them all. I love the one that's playing here. As we were just saying, I don't know why this is a surprise. I have a jam band's interview listed on my webpage, and they found out I was a deadhead with my first book. For close readers of High Crimes and Misdemeanors, most of the headings are Grateful Dead song titles.
So liberals are correct in a sense when they call you a deadhead, Ann Coulter, but it's not what they think. You're a deadhead because you love the Grateful Dead. All right, good to know. That was supposed to be funny, but it didn't work, did it?
Yeah, that totally fell flat. Deadhead means you take a plane to a place you're not actually flying as the pilot.
Do you wear the tie-dye shirt, too, and do that whole thing?
I hated tie-dye.
It's a... John Bolton. Ambassador John Bolton will be our guest tomorrow. We'll find out from him about, this John Kerry giving away the store to the Iranians. Dan Bongino will also be here tomorrow morning again. Sadly, Ann Coulter will not be with us in the morning, but Anna, it was great having you today.
And I've just spent the last 10 minutes haranguing Chris Plant to have me on tomorrow,
it's
so
true.
you may be able to hear me again tomorrow after all.
Beating him about the face and neck. Chris, you seem to have survived. What do you have in tap for us? We know you're having Ann tomorrow.
I had a Steeler microphone. Move over, Coulter. Let Jimmy take over.